Welcome to Chapter 1. In this chapter, we're going to go over the basics of entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about where do small businesses fit inside the U.S. economy, what does it take up to become an entrepreneur, what are the traits people generally share, what are the general pitfalls, creating a legacy, and just sort of a general overview of small business and why you might want to go into business and actually create one yourself. We're going to start with just some basic math of it all. Small businesses represent almost 90% of all the firms. The book says 99.7% of all the firms in the entire country. Odds are that when you graduate and go get a real job, you're probably 60% of you are going to work for a small business. And especially locally, we're pretty heavily based in small businesses. If you go towards a more populated area like Atlanta or somewhere, you'll see a lot more larger business. So depending on where you're going to live and what geography, you'll find a different percentage of small ownership versus large enterprises. So some other interesting numbers: 43% of high-tech employees go to small companies. A lot of these are going to small companies that are creating technology. They're trying to get funded. Think of the early days of Facebook or Microsoft or Apple or any of those sort of stories. Those people intentionally go to small business so they can create their own culture. And they all hope to eventually get funded and expand and probably cash out. A large percentage of all the exporters of U.S. products are small companies. I work with the Small Business Development Center, and we actually help people export products out of the state of Georgia. Georgia is really pretty unique in that the state actually has trade offices around the world in 6 different countries trying to help Georgia businesses actually find places to place their product internationally. College degrees, roughly half have a degree, half don't. There's not really magic there. And then about 90% are small businesses, so they have 20 employees or less. It's very common. One of the issues when you have so few employees is that sometimes you have a problem offering health insurance and that sort of thing to compete with the larger companies. So you may have to offer other perks like flexible hours of work or something like that, or a pay additional so people can go other places and get private insurance. So, according to the SBA, a small business or Small Business Administration, a small business is one that typically has under 500 employees, and they have different definitions for revenue depending on industry, but it's generally $50 million in sales or less too. So that's how the SBA defines small business. It's kind of gray. If you go to a large company like an IBM or someone, they have small business separated out and whatever math it is they use, and all the other folks do too. But generally, the SBA rules generally what people use when they're talking about a small business. So 500 employees or less. So it's still a fairly sizable company to be considered a small business. Um, People talk about sometimes attractive small firms. Usually they talk about attractive small firms in the context of buyouts. So here's a firm that's making a product and I think it may be undervalued, or I could get some sort of economic reward for buying them up or incorporating what they make into our actual products that the company makes. So that's an attractive small firm. So it's just somewhere where you can get financial reward. Maybe they don't quite have the market share or something, but you see the potential there. And then a micro business is a small business. I put in the notes that basically it's a hobby that covers the bills. So a lot of these start as a hobby. Other people become interested maybe as customers, and then the business kind of grows. There's the micro enterprise business council and a few other organizations that exist to try and help people incubate and grow small businesses. And then generally, small businesses have localized operations. So you could be running it out of your house. You could be running it out of a business incubator like the Burson Center that we have here in Carrollton or something like that. And generally, the production and all that sort of thing is done locally. And put in the notes, except for marketing, because you can be from anywhere and then market and sell your product all around the world. So, for instance, I joke around with some of my former clients about being from Bowden, Georgia. They have really cheap rent. It's a good place to be from, but they can do marketing and they can sell the products anywhere in the world out of their little place there in Bowden. And so that's possible for a small business to be quite successful just out of a small area. Carrollton, for instance, has a lot of companies that people probably have not heard of that are international companies. Blue Water Ropes is one that comes to mind. They make rappelling ropes and search and rescue ropes and all that sort of stuff. They're sold at RAI and all over the place. But they're here in Carrollton, Georgia, and not many people have ever heard of them. So marketing is a worldwide effort, and then production and all that can be done locally pretty easy. So another characteristic of a small business is typically they're financed by whoever the founder is starting the thing up. And typically that is done with a credit card 60% of the time. So they have an idea, they can't go to a bank. Um, Maybe they're not willing to quit their day job and go all in on it, that kind of thing. And so typically small businesses are started on a credit card. And the last number I saw was 60% are started on a credit card, which maybe the only option up front. If you have other options, please consider those, because the one thing that does is it messes up your credit score. And so when you go to a bank to get a loan, if you've already maxed out your credit cards, your score is going to be way down and you may not qualify for the loan. Long-term financing a company, it may be better for you to actually go to the bank first and get a loan and then keep your credit cards empty in case you need that money later. And then lastly, it has the potential to be more than a one-person show. Although sometimes there's some knowledge around being just a small one or two person shop and keeping it simple and profitable. A lot of employees also means a lot of headaches and HR problems and all that kind of thing. So there is some sense in staying small and staying profitable. So entrepreneurial opportunity, we're kind of looking at, is it economically attractive, or is it really something that should just stay a hobby that's just fun to you? So it's got to create value and it's got to create interest for buyers or whoever your end user is going to be, and they're actually going to have to be willing to pay for it. That's the other key. Um, People kind of glorify bootstrapping, which is basically starting the company up with minimal resources, and it's sort of this romantic sort of thing if you've ever done it or in the business community. But really, you're better off to go get proper funding and get started than trying to bootstrap a company. Bootstrapping also means you don't have the liquidity you need to actually go through and make it into the different stages of the business. So next, we'll talk a little bit about um, how to fail as an entrepreneur. People never want to think about failure, but when you're starting a business, the odds are actually against you. So a very small percentage, probably 80% or roughly, are in business after 5 years. I'm sorry, 20% or so are in business after 5 years, about an 80% failure rate. And the number is even higher if you're in a restaurant. It's about 95% failure rate. You know, think of all the restaurants that have come and gone on Maple Street. They seem like they change every 6 to 9 months because they go out of business. So here are some reasons why businesses fail. Number one is you overestimate what you can do, both maybe in skill set wise. It could also be in terms of money or raising money. Those sorts of things could sometimes it's simply narcissism. You think you're a lot better than you really are. So that's one of the real things. Kind of with this, you just have to sit back and have that honest look in the mirror and say, hey, here's what I'm great at, here's what I'm not. If you come up with things that you're not, or you just don't like to do, like I'm actually good at accounting, I just don't like it, I would hire an accountant. So it's the simple answer is if you don't like to do it, find somebody else who can. Maybe you have misunderstanding or lack understanding of the market, or haven't done proper research, so you have misconceptions or bad information. We see that quite often when we're helping businesses. They actually don't understand who their target market is and don't have a clear market strategy of how they're going to talk to. So if it's a business owner, maybe they put an ad in the newspaper. Well, who reads the newspaper anymore? You're 60 years old and older if you're reading the newspaper. So if that's not your market, then you're completely missing your customers. And so actually understanding the behavior of your customers is super important for understanding your market. Hire mediocre people happens all the time. I talk to a lot of business owners and they're like, I just need a warm body. They don't actually talk about skill sets or take time to do a proper interview or background checks to see if the people stole money before, any of those sorts of things. We've had to help some people in this that they've lost up to $300,000 or more from employee theft where they didn't do any backgrounds, that kind of thing. Um, People sometimes aren't a team player. I mean, people go into business because they don't want to work with other people. And then they find out the business works to a point, and then they have to hire the people, and they're kind of back in the same situation they are. Sometimes you just got to laugh. You can't micromanage. You got to give your employees space to actually go and do the job and learn. That also plays into being a domineering manager. With small business, it's really easy to micromanage because your couple employees are probably not 10 feet away from you at any given time. So you got to intentionally sort of leave the office sometimes, give everybody space, have rules of fighting and all that. Just think of it as a relationship because that's really what it is. You're probably going to spend more time with your employees than you are with your spouse or significant other. Um, and then lastly is failure to share ownership of the business in an equitable way. I don't really agree with that. I wouldn't share equity with someone. But where I would consider doing it, and what I did with my mortgage company, is I did profit sharing. So those that helped me start the business and help it become successful, I did profit sharing. Why wouldn't they, or why shouldn't they get part of the reward for their efforts? And so when you look at an entrepreneur, you kind of look at certain qualities that make up who that person is, and if they really should even be in business themselves or not. Uh, Really, the top one is the probably one of the most important, which is commitment and pure determination. If you start a business, no matter what you're doing, you're going to be told no a lot. You're going to be told you can't do it. People are going to laugh, whatever. You just have to be focused and say, believe in yourself and say, yeah, I can. And hey, watch this, I'm about to. That also leads then into the opportunity obsession. You want to make sure that you really understand what it is and you're absolutely dedicated to it. Odds are you're having to sign personal guarantees and stuff like that, so you're actually pledging your house and everything you own against it. So you better believe in it if you're going to lose potentially everything you have. Um, and so that kind of gives you the motivation to excel, given that you put everything basically that you have on the line. That makes you want to actually get up, go to work every day because you're going to be working 12-hour days. Owning a business isn't a 40-hour week job. It's probably more of a 60 or 80-hour plus week job, especially getting started. You're going to work insane hours probably the first 3 years. Um, Having a business though allows you to be creative. It can be self-reliant, so you can kind of make your own hours. You can make as much money as you want, that kind of thing. You can really adapt your business to your lifestyle. We used to joke around about, hey, I'm going to be in the mobile office. Well, the mobile office was the bass boat out of the lake. So you can't really do that with a normal 9 to 5 job, but you can if you have your own business. Or we joked around about, hey, I'm going to be out with Mr. Green and we're out playing golf. We just take clients out and play golf. You can do that sort of thing if you own a business. Not so much if you don't. And you have to have a huge tolerance for risk. You potentially lose everything you have. There's no clear set way to do whatever it is you're going to do. Basically, you kind of have to figure it out on your own. So everything's completely ambiguous, and there's no certainty at all that anything's going to work out. It's really just a matter of planning and some measure of luck as well. So that's kind of the basic qualities you have to have, and really determination and tolerance for risk are probably the two things out of this whole slide that I would focus on. So when you're looking at the business, people call it the founder. The founder is the person that actually initially starts the business or brings it into existence. Um, Sometimes they're thought of as the pure entrepreneur because they're the ones they didn't have anything given to them. They just kind of went out and blazed the path. So that is actually the founder. Um, the second stage is really we're looking at generations. So it would be the founder, it would be the child or second generation of the ownership. Um, and so this person's probably grown up in the business and they're really just kind of continuing on the business versus having created it themselves. If you kind of look at like Chick-fil-A for an example, they're in this situation right now. So the founder started it and created the culture and everything. And really now the generation two is just kind of keeping that alive and more as an administrative sort of role versus entrepreneurial role. So to give you some math of it, less than 1/3 of family businesses actually survived the transition from first to second generation. And so only 30% survived to the second generation. And when you go from generation to 3 to 4, half of those don't survive. So only 15% will ever make it to generation 3. And so the numbers dwindle down very, very quickly. And I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it's only like something like 4 or 5% make it to a fourth generation, which is kind of unique in our area out west because we have a lot of third, fourth generation businesses. They've been going since the 1900s, early 1900s. So those are actually been pretty fun to work with. Okay, so you can either go out and start your own business, or you can buy into a system. People joke about a franchise and a franchisee being basically buying yourself a job. And that's kind of what it is. When you look at McDonald's, most of them are franchises. You're buying a whole setup, an operation, the marketing campaign, everything. You're essentially buying yourself a job. And so there's kind of two parts to that. The franchisor is actually the corporation who has started the business, developed the concept and all that. And then the franchisee is actually running the small independent business, the actual restaurant, like McDonald's restaurant, for example, following the rules and guidelines given to them by the franchisor. So the good side of these is someone's already figured out the business model. They probably already have supply lines and all that sort of stuff already developed. So it's a lot easier. And frankly, your odds of success are a lot higher with a franchise versus going and starting your own business from scratch with your own independent concept that you just came up with. Entrepreneurial teams are important. One, it keeps you motivated. Two, it helps diversify the skill sets. So this is two or more people working together as entrepreneurs, so they can balance each other. Think of it as a marriage, though. Sometimes they go great, and a lot of times they don't. For instance, I have two friends that are brothers. They worked together their whole lives. They got in business and founded a pizza company called Peace, Love, and Pizza in Kennesaw. They had 5 locations, brought on additional partners and stuff, and then they wound up blowing up. So one of the partners, or one of the brothers rather, went out of the business, and the two brothers didn't talk to each other for a year. So think about the entrepreneurial team. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. You got to be real careful who you actually start a business with. Social entrepreneurship is starting to become more popular. So these are coming up with products and stuff that are looking at society itself. So it could be ways to generate green stuff like green energy or water or food solutions. I'm seeing people coming to market with hydroponics so that they can grow inside of the area enclosed about the size of a football field. You can actually grow the same amount of crops that you could in 100 acres. So it dramatically reduces the amount of property needed to actually grow food and the capability to grow food. So we're also seeing a lot of recycling of big things like whitewares, which would be like your stove or washer, dryer, refrigerator, those kinds of things. We're seeing companies coming now that can actually recycle those back to the independent metal, so steel, aluminum, whatever else. They can also capture the gases, the freon and whatever else, and capture and recycle all those. And so even companies like Disney and some of those are really getting into social entrepreneurship and looking at how can we run this company for the betterment of everyone. And then the social entrepreneur is simply the one that runs that business. So they're the ones that typically have the cause or the problem in mind and that tries to go through and solve that and make profit at the same time. Okay, women entrepreneurs. We're actually seeing a lot more women enter the entrepreneurial space. According to the SBA, about 9 million privately held companies or women-owned firms in the U.S. There are also programs under the SBA and other places to help female entrepreneurs. So there's the 8A, the letter A, certification, for instance. So that would be a woman-owned, minority-owned, socially disadvantaged, a veteran-owned, all those sort of things. They help give you assistance in marketing for large federal contracts and stuff. There's both certifications for women in government contracts, and then there's also a private certification that you can get too as a woman-owned small business to go help you get contracts for Coke and other companies like that. So if you have any interest in those sort of things, let me know, and I can point you to the documentation and the process. Typically, to get certified as a woman-owned business, it probably is going to take you 6 to 9 months. There are a lot of social networking groups around women entrepreneurship as well. So if you have interest in networking through any of those, let me know as well. I know our dean, Dr. McIntyre, actually attends a lot of the local women business owners meetings and stuff like that. So she could escort you to one of those if you'd like to go too. And so women and minorities and some of the others focus or face some problems actually. And so one of those is the lack of mentors and advisors. And we're seeing that come around now. There are groups like TYE. They're in Atlanta that provide mentors to all business owners. And we're also seeing the lack of financing ease up with angel investing and a lot of those other things. We've actually seen a lot of women actually starting angel investment groups, so they're actually the sharks doing the investing versus the people going and asking for the money. So we've actually seen a lot of improvement in this probably over the last 5 years. If you looked out about 10 to 15 years ago, this was a real problem. And we're seeing it start to improve pretty significantly, especially in Atlanta. It's pretty progressive in terms of views and whatnot. And so we're seeing this improve a lot here in our local area. I would say within the last 5 years, we're seeing a lot more female angels come in and helping support their own communities and stuff like that. Okay, so you have to sort of think of like an entrepreneur if you're going to start a business. So what does that mean? It means you actually have to have goals. So you're going to come up with a list of goals. So I want $1 million business. I want to make X amount, like $200,000 net every year to be able to support my lifestyle. I would like to build a business and sell it in 5 years for $3 million. So you have to set goals like that. There's specific, measurable, actionable, obtainable, and that sort of thing, so that you can actually try and achieve it and come up with a path to get there. You want to look for opportunities that have a high growth potential. If you're an investor, they're minimum looking for 10 times their return. And so if they lend you $1, they want $10 back within 5 years. You should be looking for similar opportunities when you start a business. So generally people are looking for 10. The high end are looking for a 30 times multiple of whatever money they give you. So, you can't be like, hey, I want to go into a newspaper business right now, because with social media and all that sort of stuff, that business is going away unless you're something specially like a trade magazine or something. You have to be somebody that your personality likes being challenged, that you don't back down from anything. And that's really having the fortitude to go forward and see things through is probably one of the biggest traits you can have. And then lastly, dreaming big. I mean, it can be as big or as small as you choose to make it. And really the only thing limiting it is you and the amount of work you're willing to put in. So some motivations that are common for owning a business is being an entrepreneur is extremely challenging. I can't tell you this enough. You're going to put in so many hours working and stuff like that, trying to figure out every day is a unique situation. There's no manual on how to run a business. Every day is fascinating. So just know that every day is going to be challenging too. So a lot of it's rewarding too, don't get me wrong, but every day is going to have its own unique challenges and stuff. It takes an underlying love of business and what you're doing to kind of keep you going day to day, year after year. And then kind of look at, can it be passed down? I put the generational wealth. Are you creating this to pass it down to your family, stuff like that, to actually create a legacy within your family? I mentioned Chick-fil-A earlier. This is kind of them. I see a lot of businesses here. I'm helping one transition to the fourth generation of ownership right now. That kind of thing is really neat when it can be passed within one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, and the family is continuing to grow the business, and the business is continuing to help the family and bring them close together. So it's really neat thing to see when it works out. The social responsible part, are you making the world a better place? And for some people, that's sort of the meaning in life. That's how you give back to folks. You're giving people jobs, you're helping them out, and basically, if you're the business owner, you're becoming part of their family too, because they're dependent on you to make good decisions so they can keep their house and everything else. All right, so is a small business right for you? You have to be really passionate and really like whatever it is you're going to make or sell. So if I were going to start a Zaxby's and I hated chicken, uh, I would be a really bad idea. And one of the people I know actually did that. Bill started his Zaxby's, put like $1.2 million in it, and didn't even eat chicken. Didn't know how to cook chicken. I'm like, Bill, that was a bad idea. He laughed and he's like, I agree, and he sold it. But you actually have to like your product and use your product yourself. What is your tolerance for risk? Like for me, I like risk. I think it's fun. That's not true for a lot of people. So you got to be willing to put up everything you have basically at risk and stuff like that. Are you okay making decisions? I would actually clarify that even more and say making quick decisions. Sometimes in business you have to make decisions on the spot. If you're somebody that takes you weeks or months to make a decision, or you don't like picking what restaurant or what color or whatever else, probably not running a business probably is not going to be for you. Are you willing to take on numerous responsibilities? You're everything in the business. So you're the janitor, you're the cook, you're the manufacturing, engineering, marketing, CEO. You're everybody. So you're going to have responsibilities for absolutely everything. And then the last thing, will you be able to avoid burnout? That is a huge thing because you can only live without sleep and all that stuff so long. Having a business, if you don't take care of yourself, can absolutely aid you. For me, I actually had a heart attack about 4 years ago because I wasn't taking care of myself from owning the businesses that I owned. So, can you avoid burnout? You know, make sure your exercise, diet, all those sorts of things. A lot of times, your physical condition is taken for granted in the business, especially if you're young. I started my businesses when I was 28, so uh, that is a huge thing. Avoiding burnout and then maintaining your health so that you can live long is a good thing too. So this is important, both for the test. So you should know what both of these are for the test. But a reluctant entrepreneur is someone who is forced into business essentially. Um, so one of the people I know was out his dream and everything. He was actually a ski instructor out in Colorado. His family owned a restaurant, and the father got sick, and then the son that was out in Colorado had to come back and run the family business. He was a reluctant entrepreneur. He was reluctant to get off ski slopes to come cook hamburgers and hot dogs for folks. He did it. They've been in business for 25 years and it's worked out. But that is a reluctant entrepreneur. It's somebody that's not started the business. They're kind of forced into it by illness, by death, by some sort of hardship, usually within their family. The other type is a corporate refugee. So this would be somebody who got laid off or fired or whatever in maybe 2008, 2009 in the bad economy. There were no jobs to be had. And so the corporate refugees then going to go create a business to basically have their own job. Other than that, they would have never created it. So we saw the number of businesses, small businesses, escalate a lot during 2008, 2009, just because people were having to create their own jobs because there weren't any else out in the marketplace. So that's a corporate refugee, and again, you should know both of those for your exam. Okay, so this we've talked about a lot of it already, but here's some of the basic motivations for funding a company. Personal fulfillment. You have to get joy out of it. With mine, we did stupid stuff like every office within my business, we actually set up a putt-putt course. So you could go through and basically play about 10 greens through our offices, stuff like that. So that's probably personal fulfillment and just the enjoying the company and camaraderie kind of thing of the people you work with. Which also brought personal satisfaction for me. I like the challenge of figuring things out, that kind of thing. Financial independence and time independence both, so I can make my own schedule, and then financial independence. I could go do what I wanted. You could take vacations, all that sort of stuff, like other people kind of dream of. But that's kind of we've already talked about most of this. So we'll move along. All right, so this is actually super important for your tests, and it's also important to understand. Um, so the book calls it three personalities. I'll call it three hats. I don't really think of it as three personalities, but the first one is a technician. So if you're starting a business and you're a good technician, let's say you're a heating and air conditioning person and you went out to start your own heat and air business. You were initially starting a technician because you're the one that knew how to do the installs and all that sort of stuff, and you're going to go out and get business, that sort of thing. Maybe you already have a client base. So you're starting the business as a technician. Um, and then you're going to have to grow into the others. So you're a technician, and then your business grows. So you're having to hire other technicians, and then you're forced into being a manager. And so now you're a manager. Maybe you've got 3 or 4 teams, and then maybe you'll say you have then you go out and you have to hire other managers. So maybe you're going to take your heating and air business and then split it. So you have new installs, and maybe when you have a manager over new installs, and then you have another manager that's over maintenance, and then you're forced almost into the entrepreneur role, which is looking at how the business works. So should you go paper-based ticketing from that to cloud-based so it's easy to manage, stuff like that? You're really then starting to focus on strategies and everything as an actual entrepreneur and working on the business versus in the business. The key thing is the technician and the manager basically working in the business and not necessarily looking to intentionally grow the business. The entrepreneur is actually looking to intentionally grow the business in a manageable fashion. Okay. And so, competitive edge of entrepreneurs. So, number one is you can react very, very quickly. A large company, it takes them time to react sometimes. So, you as a small business owner can beat them to the punch. You can focus on your customers. You could a lot of times just ask them, "Hey, what do you want? What are you willing to pay for?" Those sorts of things. So, you absolutely have customer focus. You can go in niche markets and get high profits, whereas a big company may not be able to go into the niche market because it's not be profitable enough for them. You can go into innovation globalization. So, we're seeing some of this around solar power, for instance. We were looking at somebody doing gigawatt solar power that wanted to come into Douglasville to make their solar panels, stuff like that. Or you can export your products. We have one company in Georgia that exports wood pellets to England, and in England they use it to heat their homes. So, globalization's a big thing too. Um, Quality, people pay for quality and performance of whatever it is. So you can make a smaller specific good and charge a lot of money for it. Like for instance, in Bowden, there's a place that makes off-road shocks. They get a premium, but theirs are amazing. And their quality is so high. As a matter of fact, if you ever break it, just send it back and tell us how you broke it, and we'll give you a brand new one. Um, so that's ORI out in Bowden. And then integrity and responsibility. People want to do business with people they like, know, and trust. That's kind of key. So who do you trust as far as accountants, CPAs, all that sort of stuff, attorneys? All those have to do around responsibility and trust. That's an important part of doing business. Okay, so here's some additional resources if you're actually going to start a business. You can go to the SBA's website, sba.gov. Um, The other one that I see a lot of people use is, especially here, is the Small Business Development Center, which is where I came from. I was a consultant for the Small Business Development Center. We actually have one of those on campus here at West Georgia. It's actually up at 105 at Emerson Hall. So Todd, Jane, and Cole are up there, and they can help you with any resources you need for actually starting your own business. Okay. And so when people kind of get to the end of selling their business and all that, they finally start to look back and be like, hey, what is my actual legacy? What have I left for my kids, grandkids, the community, all that sort of thing? Um, and so they start kind of looking back at their life and looking at the legacy. Um, and did they win at the wrong game? So was I winning at business and completely ignored my family, that kind of thing? A lot of times people start looking at that right towards the end of business and they didn't really consider it all, up front. Um, I don't know, when you look at Rockefeller and a lot of those folks, yeah, that's great. They gave a lot of money, but this is the part they figured out at the end of their lives. And so as you get going with your business, think about what is your actual legacy? What do you want to give? Is it satisfaction, fulfillment? Kind of what is it you're going to do? One of my friends actually, he started a second business with the intention of, if he got that one big enough, his previous business, which was the pizza restaurant that I mentioned earlier, he would actually just turn the pizza restaurant into a nonprofit and donate all the profits to something. In the meantime, one day a month, he rotates around, and he'll actually one day a month give the profits of the restaurant to a nonprofit or just somebody that needs it. Maybe they're having cancer treatments or something. They just need a couple of dollars. He'll donate the entire profits of that day. So he's not waiting till the end. He's actually doing something now to help, a little bit along until he can get to his end goal. And so, kind of looking back when you're successful and all that, kind of what's the end game? Where do you want to be at? And so that's kind of the end of the first chapter. This chapter is, like I said, it's kind of an introduction to the business, a little bit about what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, that kind of stuff. We'll build on all this in the later chapters as we move along.